I stood near gate 14 with my coat draped over one arm, the heirloom veil clutched tightly in the other, when the message arrived. 5 short words. Cold. Final. Actually, it's just her family. No greeting, no apology, not even a mom. Just that. Like I was a forgotten errand crossed off a list. The terminal noise faded around me. A woman nearby was laughing into her phone, her suitcase swinging against her calf. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve asking for candy. The world moved on, but I didn't. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, willing it to be a mistake. But the little dot that meant he was typing never came back. I didn't cry. I wanted to. My chest felt full of water and glass, something that sloshed and pierced with every breath. But I didn't cry. Instead, I sat down slowly on the metal bench, smoothing my skirt like I had anywhere to be, like dignity hadn't just packed up and flown off without me. I had paid for my ticket myself. No one asked me to, of course. I volunteered, happy to be included, happy to come. I bought a new dress. Not expensive, but neat. Midnight blue with pearl buttons. I packed the veil my mother had worn in 1947 and I in 1972, hoping his bride might find it charming. I had it cleaned, folded in tissue, tied with ribbon. There were also the gifts. A check tucked in an envelope and a locket engraved with their initials. Now all of it sat beside me in a floral suitcase with a worn handle, like some museum exhibit of wasted effort. He knew I was coming, knew I'd booked the flight, the hotel, knew I was bringing the veil. He just waited until I'd arrived, until I'd landed, until I was standing in the place I came for him. And then he erased me with a text. I opened the message again, reread it as if tone might be hiding somewhere in the white space between the letters. It wasn't. It was what it was. I zipped up my coat and rose, holding myself straighter than I felt. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe the universe was. And I was not about to let it see me crumble. The taxi line was short. The driver, a young man with tattoos curling out from under his sleeves, barely looked up when I gave him the name of a hotel I'd picked because it looked clean and quiet. He asked if I was in town for the wedding. I smiled tightly. Not anymore, I said. The ride was silent after that. The city rolled by with its palm trees and perfect skies, nothing like Minnesota. Too bright for a day like this. Too beautiful to fit the hollow I felt inside. At the hotel, I checked in, tipped the bellboy, though I usually never did, and stood in the room for a long time, not moving. The window looked out over a parking lot and a strip mall with a pharmacy and a frozen yogurt shop. Not the view I'd imagined when I'd booked it. I unpacked the veil first, laying it gently on the bed like someone fragile and asleep. Then the locket. Then the card. I placed them in a row, like evidence in a case no one would prosecute. And then I sat in the armchair by the window and stared. He wasn't always like this. That's the thing. He used to cry when I dropped him off at kindergarten. He used to make me drawings of houses with me inside and hearts over the roof. He used to sit beside me while I peeled apples for pie and ask how the sun worked. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That weddings were for family. That mothers mattered. That being the one who stayed up with him when he had the measles meant something, even now. That maybe he'd want me to stand behind him that day, quietly, with love. Instead, he erased me. And still, I didn't cry. I sat quietly until the light faded and the neon signs across the street blinked on. Then I stood, walked to the desk, took out the notepad and pen beside the phone, and began to write a list. It had 2 items on it. Cancel the transfer to James, his name. Call Margaret. Margaret is my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to say. Because if I no longer had a place at his table, I'd stop funding the feast. I folded the veil back into its box one last time. Then I placed the locket inside and sealed the envelope. Not with tears, but with resolve. The hotel room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and something older, old carpets maybe, or tired air. I stood at the little window with my hand on the curtain cord, watching the sky soften from gold to gray. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed, not because I'd forgotten it, because I wasn't ready to admit I was here, alone, without a purpose. I had come for my son's wedding. I had brought the veil. I had brought the gift. I had packed everything carefully. Extra stockings, my pill organizer, even a nail file in a Ziploc so it wouldn't get flagged at security. That kind of planning doesn't disappear just because someone uninvites you by text. I finally opened the suitcase. I laid things out like I was still going somewhere. Shoes on the floor, dress on a hanger, toiletries in the bathroom. And then I reached for the small wooden box wrapped in a handkerchief, nested in the clothes. The veil. It had belonged to my mother, Ruth. Handmade lace, delicate as breath. She wore it at her wedding, and I wore it at mine. I'd had it cleaned and restored, paid more for the preservation service than I'd paid for my own wedding dress. I imagined handing it to my daughter-in-law on the morning of her wedding, telling her how it came from women who stayed, who worked, who loved stubbornly. I imagined her smile. Now I ran my fingers over the fine netting. Too fine for this world, I thought. Too fine for people who send 5-word messages to erase a mother. I put it back in the box. I didn't sleep that night. Not deeply. The bed was too hard, the sheets too white. I lay on my side watching shadows shift on the ceiling, the television silent in the corner. I kept waiting for another message. Some addendum, some explanation. But my phone stayed quiet on the bedside table, screen dark. By morning, I had decided. I called the front desk and asked for the number to a local law office. The man on the phone gave me 3, his voice chipper in that way hotel clerks are trained to be. I thanked him and chose the second number on the list, just because it sounded like the kind of firm that didn't hang up on old women. They could see me that afternoon. I confirmed the time, dressed with care, and packed the veil back into the box one final time. I left it on the desk with a note. Do not disturb. I'll be back. But I didn't take the gift envelope with me. That one went into my purse. I wasn't done deciding what to do with that. The law office was in a beige building next to a dry cleaner. It didn't look like much, but the woman who met me in the waiting room had silver hair and the kind of direct gaze I trusted. Ms. Whitney, she said. I'm Anne. I need to update my will, I said, without preamble, and establish a trust. Anne nodded, not asking why. She took me to her office and poured me a glass of water. I liked her already. I want to remove my son, James Whitney, as beneficiary, I said. Entirely. And I want everything to go to my granddaughter. She raised an eyebrow slightly. May I ask why? Because she's the only one who's never lied to me, I said. And because I won't leave my life's work to a man who deletes his mother like a spam email. Anne didn't react with surprise or sympathy, just made notes. Does your granddaughter have a legal guardian? She's 18, college freshman, brilliant. Then it's simple, she said. We'll draft a will and a living trust. Do you have any specific terms? Yes, I said. She can't touch a penny until she turns 25, unless it's for education, health care, or buying her first home. Very reasonable. She's kind, Smart, but she's young. I want to give her help, not ruin her. Anne looked up at me and smiled. You're not ruining anyone, Ms. Whitney. You're restoring balance. It took 2 hours. When I left, I had a folder with copies and a business card. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything. Just calm. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Back at the hotel, the sun was beginning to set again. Another perfect California sky. I sat in the same chair by the window, but something was different. The veil was still on the desk. I didn't move it. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted my granddaughter, Clara. Sweetheart, are you free for lunch tomorrow? She answered within 2 minutes. Of course I am, Grandma. Where should I meet you? And just like that, I wasn't uninvited from everything. Just from one wedding. Clara had her father's eyes. That was always the first thing people noticed. Wide-set, dark, thoughtful. But where his had grown guarded with age, hers were open, searching. The kind of eyes that waited for answers instead of shutting down the questions. She met me at a little cafe 3 blocks from the hotel, wearing jeans and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a braid like she had when she was 10. She hugged me the moment she saw me. You look beautiful, she said. I nearly said, don't lie, but stopped myself. Let her say it. Let her mean it. I'd spent too many years brushing off kindness, as if it had an expiration date. We ordered sandwiches and iced tea, and then she leaned forward and asked quietly, Grandma, what happened? I took a long sip of tea. Your father decided I wasn't invited, that's all. Her brows knit. But he said you weren't feeling well, that you might not fly. I smiled sadly. Did he? That's generous of him. She looked down, fiddling with her straw wrapper. He didn't say much, actually. Just that the wedding was small, that it would be mostly her family. Well, that part's true, I said. It was all her family. By design. She looked up, face tight, with something between worry and shame. He shouldn't have done that. No, I said softly. He shouldn't have. I didn't tell her how it felt in the airport, how my knees went a little weak reading that text. I didn't describe the silence in the room, the weight of the heirloom veil still folded in its box. Some things weren't meant for grandchildren to carry. Can I ask you something? Clara said. What happened between you two? You and Dad? I leaned back, the question sinking deep. What happened? As if it were one thing, a single moment, a clean fracture. But it wasn't. It was 1,000 small things, over years, like standing in the ocean and slowly realizing the tide is pulling you out. He changed, I said finally. College changed him. Or maybe life did. I don't blame him for growing. I blame him for turning his back. Clara didn't speak. She just listened. That alone meant more than she could know. When your grandfather died, I said, James came home for the funeral. He held my hand the whole time. Cried more than I did. He stayed for 3 days, and we cooked, and we laughed, and we remembered. And then he left. And with each visit after that, something closed off in him. I picked up my sandwich but didn't bite. He married fast, moved west. Got a job, a house, a new circle. He stopped returning calls, sent gift cards for Christmas instead of coming home. And when I offered help, he took it, but always with a kind of silence, like he was doing me a favor by accepting it. Clara was quiet. Did he ever say why? No, but I knew. Knew what? I hesitated. That I embarrassed him. Her hand froze around her glass. I was a public school teacher, not glamorous, not polished. I wore cardigans with loose buttons and brought Jell-O salads to potlucks. His wife's family, well, they come from money. They speak in a certain way, dress in a certain way. I never fit in. But that's no excuse. I shrugged. People don't need excuses to abandon you. Just convenience. Clara looked like she might cry, but didn't. She had my bones. I saw it in her chin. I want you to know something, I said. I'm not telling you this to make you choose sides. I'm telling you because no one else will. Because it's the truth. And because I want you to understand that what your father did to me has nothing to do with who you are or who you will become. She nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I'd meant for her father and his bride. Inside was the locket, not the check. That was already being rerouted. I brought this for the wedding, I said, but I think I brought it for you. She opened it gently. The locket was small and gold, engraved with delicate initials, C.W. and L.W. Clara Whitney, and long ago Louise Whitney, my mother-in-law. Inside, a photo of Clara at 5 and one of me at the same age. She blinked fast. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll keep it, I said. I'll keep it. The check would go to the trust. The veil would go back in the closet. But this moment, was enough. I had thought I'd lost a son, but I'd found a truth and a granddaughter who saw me. And that was something to build on. My husband died on a Wednesday. It was early spring, one of those bright mornings when the world feels too alive for grief. The daffodils were just starting to poke through the soil by our porch. I remember because I'd noticed them that same morning, bending to touch one, thinking how stubborn they were, how they always came back, no matter how hard the frost had been. He died quietly. No drama. No long illness. Just a breath that didn't come back. George Whitney was not a remarkable man if you looked at him through the world's lens. He sold insurance, drove a Dodge, made his coffee too weak. But he loved me with a steadiness that outlasted every disappointment life handed us. When my mother passed, he held my hand for 6 straight hours. When I lost the baby before James, he came home from work and just lay beside me until I slept. We were married for 34 years. Not all of them easy, not all of them kind. But we chose each other again and again, even in the quiet. After the funeral, James stayed for 3 days. He helped clean the garage, sorted old papers, took 2 boxes of his father's things back to the airport. On the last morning, he hugged me long, his chin against my shoulder. "You'll be okay, right?" he asked. I said yes. And he believed me. He left me with the house, the Buick, and a bank account that could last if I was careful. He also left me with silence. A long one. In the beginning, I didn't feel it. I filled the days with school. I was still teaching then, 3rd grade, which meant juice boxes and shoelaces and sticky hands. The noise helped. Children don't leave room for too much thinking. But evenings came, and they were quieter than I'd ever known. No voice from the other room asking where the good batteries were. No shuffle of slippers on the kitchen floor. Just the creak of the house and my own breath. The first year, James called every Sunday, always at 5. We'd talk about the weather, about my health, about what he was reading. Then it became every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then only when he needed something. There were excuses, of course. Work, travel, the baby. His wife wasn't big on phone calls, he said. She liked structure. She liked space. I gave him space, Enough to lose a continent between us. He never said it outright, but I could feel it in the way he hesitated before introducing me to new people. "This is my mom," followed by a pause, a shift of tone. I wasn't elegant enough. My hands were worn. My laugh too loud. I started sending gift cards for Christmas, just to match the tone. I thought it might make things easier. He never complained. But the cards never came with calls. People talk about the loneliness of widowhood like it's something that happens all at once, like a blow to the chest. But for me, it came gradually. After the casseroles stopped. After the neighbors stopped dropping in. After James stopped saying, "love you," at the end of our calls. It settled in like dust. I never remarried. Never wanted to. George had been the kind of man you only get once. Not flashy, but real. Present. He used to say, "Some men try to be heroes. I'll settle for coming home." And he always did. Right up until he didn't. There were nights, especially in the second year, when I'd wake up and talk to him anyway. Just soft words into the dark. Telling him what James had said, what Clara had drawn, how the furnace was making a new noise. I knew it was silly. But it helped. I think he would have been angry. Not at James exactly, but at how easily a son can forget who taught him to tie his shoes, who cleaned up his throw-up at midnight, who ran after his bike, cheering the first time the training wheels came off. George would have said, "Mary, don't let him treat you like this." I used to answer out loud, "It's just how he is now." But now, I don't know. Now, sitting in this hotel room with the veil boxed up, the will rewritten, and Clara drinking iced tea with her knees curled under her like a girl half her age, I wonder if George was right. Maybe I let it go too long. Maybe I excused too much. But not anymore. There's a drawer in my kitchen back home that sticks on the left side. You have to tug a little, then it slides open all at once with a clatter. That drawer holds everything I thought I'd never need to reference again. Receipts, bank letters, photocopies, old warranties, and a folder labeled James. I started it when he got married. At first, it was just for organization. I didn't want to forget what I'd given or promised in case he ever asked. But over time, it became something else. A record, maybe. A quiet ledger of what it cost to stay in someone's life when love wasn't enough. The first paper is from 2003, a $12,000 check. Down payment for their first apartment. He said it would be temporary, just until they got on their feet. They moved out a year later, into a condo his in-laws helped finance. No one mentioned my part. Next is a credit card payoff. $6,800. He'd lost his job. Said the bills were piling up. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, reading his email twice before calling the bank. I told him not to worry. Mothers don't let their children sink. Not if they can help it. Then came the baby. Clara, my shining light. When she was born, I offered a college savings account. He said it was too early, that they'd set something up on their own. They never did. Instead, the folder holds receipts for diapers, a stroller, a hospital bill that somehow didn't get covered. I sent money for each without asking questions. In 2011, a torn knee ligament. He didn't have enough PTO, he said, and the insurance deductible was high. $2,300. I wired it the same day. In 2015, their car broke down. Not the fancy one his wife drove. The older one for errands. I covered the repairs. $120. A year later, the roof leaked. He called in the middle of the night. His voice rushed, low, like he didn't want someone else hearing. "Mom, I hate to ask, but..." He didn't hate it. I wired $8,000 that morning. In total, the folder holds records of $57,000 over 20 years, not counting gifts. not counting flights to visit, not counting the groceries I stocked in their kitchen when they were tight that month, not counting the coat I bought Clara every winter until she was 17, not counting the new laptop I mailed when he said hers broke and they couldn't swing it right now. It's not about the money. It never was. If he'd said thank you, if he'd looked me in the eye and called me just to talk, it would have balanced. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being help and became expected. A quiet tax on motherhood. I didn't notice the shift at first. The first 5 years, every dollar felt like a hug from afar. But eventually, the calls came only when something was needed. And the warmth dried up. The gifts went unmentioned. The deposits unacknowledged. Last year, on his birthday, I mailed him a check. Just a gesture. He cashed it the next day. He didn't call. He never did. The last paper in the folder is from 4 months ago. A transfer of $3,000 for incidentals ahead of the wedding. Florals, deposits, whatever she needs, he'd said. I sent it that same afternoon. Of course I did. I was thrilled to be included. Thrilled to be invited. Funny, isn't it? How much I paid to be disinvited. I looked over the papers one last time before my trip. I'd pulled them out to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that the distance between us wasn't just emotional, that I hadn't dreamed the neglect. It was there in black and white. They say love doesn't keep score. Maybe it shouldn't, but dignity does. That first night in the hotel was the longest one I'd had in years, longer than the night George died, longer than the night Clara was born and no one thought to call. The air conditioner buzzed quietly, and the glow of the television cast shadows on the wall, even though I hadn't turned it on. I couldn't bring myself to. The silence felt more honest. I'd unpacked everything, though there was no point. The dress I'd brought hung limply in the closet, untouched. Simple, navy, with a little lace at the collar. I'd picked it because it reminded me of something my mother once wore. Modest, elegant, timeless. It was supposed to be the dress I watched my son marry in. Now it looked like a garment abandoned at a thrift store. The veil lay boxed beside the bed. I couldn't bring myself to put it back in the suitcase. It deserved more than zippers and nylon linings. It had survived generations, and I had brought it here with hope. I made myself a cup of tea using the tiny coffee maker in the corner, the kind of tea that tastes like cardboard and regret. I sat by the window, the cup warm in my hands, watching the cars move in and out of the parking lot below. Somewhere out there, perhaps only a few miles away, my son was laughing, probably finishing his rehearsal dinner, surrounded by people in cocktail dresses and linen shirts, drinking wine paid for by someone else. I wondered if he thought about me at all, if he felt the absence, or if he was relieved. That was the cruelest part, not the exclusion itself, but the possibility that it hadn't even hurt him to do it. I looked at my phone. No new messages, no call to explain, no apology. Just that one 5-word dismissal hours ago. Still there, still unread, still permanent. I opened a blank note on the screen. I started to type. Dear James. Then stopped. What could I say that I hadn't already tried to show? I loved him. I raised him. I never asked for much. And still, he pulled away. Instead, I opened the photo gallery. Scrolled through old pictures. Him in kindergarten, tooth missing, face lit up with mischief. Him at 12, in a scout uniform, saluting crookedly. Him holding Clara in the hospital, pride and fear warring on his young face. And then, fewer photos, longer gaps, fewer smiles meant for me. I didn't cry. I expected I would, but the tears didn't come. It wasn't sorrow I felt. It was something deeper, heavier, a kind of quiet realization that maybe this wasn't a sudden cruelty, but the final confirmation of a slow departure. And then something happened. Somewhere around midnight, as I sat in that stiff chair in the strange room, I felt a shift. It was small, not loud, not brave, just a quiet thought. Maybe this was a blessing. If I hadn't come, I might have gone another year pretending things were fine, sending money, waiting for phone calls that didn't come. Maybe this cruel, sharp moment was the clarity I needed. Because something inside me had started to whisper what George might have said if he were here. "Mary, you have a life too." It startled me, that voice. So calm, so clear. I poured the cold tea down the sink and washed the mug. I pulled the extra blanket out of the closet and folded it neatly at the foot of the bed. I brushed my teeth, changed into my nightgown, and smoothed out the comforter with both hands like I used to at home. And then I crawled into bed alone, not because I was forgotten, but because I had remembered something. I belonged to myself. I always had. And if no one else would honor that, then I would. Clara called me the next morning. I was sitting by the window again, coffee in hand this time, trying to work up the appetite for the complimentary breakfast I knew I wouldn't touch. The phone buzzed gently against the table, and when I saw her name, something inside me softened. At least someone still thought of me first thing in the morning. "Grandma," she said, her voice tight. "I just heard. Dad didn't invite you?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "No, sweetheart. He didn't." There was silence on the line, but not the kind that happens when someone doesn't know what to say. It was the kind that fills with disbelief, with anger. I knew that silence. I'd lived inside it for years. I don't understand," she said finally. "He told me it was just going to be a small ceremony, family only. I assumed you were flying in early. I thought you were part of that." "I was," I said gently. "In my mind, I was." "Why didn't you say anything yesterday at lunch?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a breath. Because I didn't want our time together to become about him. I wanted to see you. Just you. I could hear her shifting, pacing maybe. She was like that, even as a child. Always needed to move when something didn't sit right. He never even mentioned it. Not once. How could he? "Because it was easier for him to lie than to look me in the eye," I said. "And because he didn't think anyone would ask questions." "Well, he was wrong," she snapped. "I'm asking. I'm going to ask him right now." "No, Clara." She stopped. I could feel it. "No?" she echoed. "This isn't yours to fix," I said. "It's not your battle. It's mine. And I've already decided how to handle it." She was quiet again, but not with that hollow silence. This time, it was listening. Understanding. "What are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I said. "The veil stays with me. The gift goes to someone who deserves it. And my money, Clara, my name, my legacy, it won't go where I'm not welcome." "You rewrote your will." "Yes." "And the trust?" Her voice was careful now, soft. "It's yours," I said. "Not because you asked, not because you're blood, but because you've never treated me like a burden." I could hear her breathing through the line. "Grandma," she whispered. "That's too much. I don't need—" "I know you don't," I said. "That's the point. You've never once made me feel like I owed you anything. That's why I trust you with it." She didn't speak for a long while, and when she did, her voice was steady, but thick. "I'll make you proud. You already do." A knock sounded at her end. Someone calling her, probably. Her father, I guessed. "I have to go," she said. "But can I see you again? After the wedding?" "I'd like that." "No," she said firmly. "I mean it. I want to stay close. I want to know you, really know you." And that, after everything, was the gift I hadn't dared to hope for. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. The coffee had gone cold again. The world outside was waking up. Somewhere, James was tying his tie, checking his reflection, making jokes about florists running late. And he had no idea that his daughter had just stepped quietly away from the narrative he'd written. No rebellion, no scene, just a quiet, clear step. And maybe that was enough. The call to the bank wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, measured, like setting down a heavy box you've carried too far for too long. I waited until mid-afternoon, when I knew the lines would be quieter. I'd checked the time difference. Minnesota was 2 hours ahead, and dialed the number printed on the back of my debit card. Not the mobile app, not the website. I wanted to speak to a person. I wanted to hear it said aloud. "Thank you for calling Northern Prairie Bank," the woman chirped. "This is Rachel. How can I assist you today?" "My name is Mary Whitney," I said. "I need to review and cancel all scheduled external transfers from my accounts, and I want to revoke a linked authorization." There was a short pause. I could hear her typing. "Certainly, Mrs. Whitney. I'll just need to verify a few details before we begin." I answered her questions without hesitation. Birth date. Last 4 digits. My childhood pet's name. Samson. A Labrador, loyal to the end, unlike some. Once I was verified, her tone shifted slightly, more respectful. "I see there are currently 3 scheduled recurring transfers. One to a James Whitney, monthly, for $850. One quarterly for $2,000 labeled household support, and one annual disbursement of $5,000 set for next month. I want them all canceled," I said. "Permanently?" "Yes, and I'd like to revoke any access he has to view or request changes to my account." Rachel hesitated. "He's listed as a secondary contact on your online banking, with permissions to initiate but not finalize transfers. We can remove that access immediately." "Do it." She typed again. "Done." "May I ask, just for our records, should we mark this as fraud, family reassignment, or personal change of circumstances?" "Call it clarity," I said. Silence. Then quietly, "Understood." I asked her to email me the updated confirmation, and she did so within minutes. I read every line, every canceled dollar, every severed link. There it was. Tangible. Real. For 20 years, I had subsidized his life like a silent investor in a company that never listed me on the board. Rent, bills, emergencies that turned into patterns. I did it because I was his mother, because I thought that's what love meant. But it's not love when only one person shows up. It's not family when the calls come only with conditions. And I'm not an ATM. That night, I took out the folder labeled James from my suitcase. I had packed it on instinct, not knowing if I'd need it. Now, I opened it one last time. Each sheet felt heavier now. Not because of the money, but because of the silence that had followed each transaction. No thank you. No calls. Just quiet withdrawals. I stacked the papers neatly, placed them back in the folder, and slid it to the bottom of my suitcase. I would shred them when I got home. A new ritual. Not one of erasure, but of release. In the silence of the hotel room, I lay back on the bed, hands folded over my stomach. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. The kind of clean that comes after you finally speak the truth out loud. Maybe James would call when he noticed. Maybe not. But for once, I wouldn't be waiting. The next morning, I walked. Not because I had somewhere to be, not because anyone expected me, but because the air felt good on my skin and I needed to remember what it meant to move without purpose, just for the sake of feeling alive. The hotel was near a small downtown square, the kind with benches and old trees that had survived half a dozen sidewalk renovations. I passed a bookstore with a wooden sign that creaked gently in the breeze. A woman my age was arranging paperbacks in the window, humming to herself. Across the street, a little boy tugged at his father's hand, pointing at something in the bakery window. The father bent down, nodded, laughed. They walked in together. I stood watching them longer than I meant to. Years ago, that had been me and James. A cold day in Minneapolis, a coffee shop on Hennepin Avenue. He was 4. Wanted a cinnamon roll bigger than his face. I said no. He pouted. I caved. He licked the frosting first, and we both laughed when it stuck to his nose. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. The ache surprised me, not because it was painful, but because it wasn't. It was warm, a good memory, untainted. There were so many of them, scattered like pennies I'd forgotten I'd dropped. We'd had good years, before college, before pride, before the world started measuring people by polish and pocketbook. Maybe that was the hardest part, knowing the love had been real once, that it had eroded not because of hate, but because of distance and neglect. Like a house left unattended until the roof buckles and no one remembers how to fix it. I turned down a side street with blooming jacarandas. Their petals fell like violet confetti on the sidewalk. I picked one up, held it between my fingers. So fragile, so persistent. I passed a bridal shop. The mannequins wore gowns heavy with beading and illusion sleeves. In the center, a young woman in a pale green dress was adjusting the train of another, pinning the back. I watched through the glass. She wasn't my daughter-in-law, and that wasn't my veil. But for a moment, I let myself pretend. In another world, maybe I had helped her pick it. Maybe I'd sat in a chair in that same shop, clasping my hands in my lap, blinking back tears as she turned toward the mirror. Maybe she'd reached for me. Maybe she'd said, "Thank you for raising him. But we don't get to live in the maybes. We live in the day after." And in that day, I walked on. A bench under a tree called to me, and I sat down. Birds darted between branches overhead. A little girl ran by with a helium balloon, her grandfather trailing behind. He smiled at me, the kind of smile older people share with each other without needing names. A quiet, "I see you." I saw him too. The wind picked up a little, carrying the scent of bread from the bakery. My stomach growled, finally catching up to my freedom. I stood, dusted off my coat, and walked back toward town. I stopped in that bakery, bought a cinnamon roll. I told the woman behind the counter, "Make sure it's got too much frosting." She laughed. Back in the square, I sat again and ate slowly, tearing off pieces, watching the world pass by. No one knew me here. No one expected anything. And yet, for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt more seen than I had at any family gathering. Sometimes dignity doesn't come with grand statements or door-slamming ultimatums. Sometimes it's a woman eating a cinnamon roll on a bench, savoring her own company, while her bank account breathes free and her heart finally beats without apology. The law office was quiet, tucked above a real estate agency in a 2-story building with green trim and peeling paint. No reception desk, just a brass plaque on the door. Chambers and Reed, attorneys at law. The kind of place that didn't waste money on appearance, and I liked that. Anne opened the door herself. She wore the same navy blazer, the same composed expression. She offered me a seat and poured water into a thick glass. I didn't need it. I wasn't here to soften anything. "I've reviewed the documents you signed last time," she said, placing a neat stack of papers in front of me. "We've removed your son as a beneficiary and added your granddaughter as the sole recipient of the living trust and estate." I nodded. "Good." "Would you like to include a letter of intent?" she asked. "Sometimes it helps clarify choices if anyone contests." "No one will," I said. "He won't fight for something he didn't know I still had." She raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't push. "All right. We've also drafted the irrevocable trust, as you requested. The terms specify access for education, housing, or medical expenses until age 25, after which Clara has full control." "Perfect," I said. "She's responsible, but I want her to earn the rest, not expect it." Anne tapped the folder, then folded her hands. "Would you like to include a clause preventing James from contesting or attempting to access the trust?" "Yes." "Done." The pen in my hand felt heavier than I remembered. Signing those papers wasn't hard. It wasn't even sad. It felt like writing a final chapter that had been waiting, half finished, for years. I signed each line, my name steady and sure. M. Whitney. Again. Again. When it was over, Anne gathered the papers and sealed them in a blue envelope. "Would you like me to notify your son?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said. "Let the silence speak." She slid the envelope into a drawer. "Then we're finished." As I stood to leave, she placed a hand gently on my arm. "You know," she said, "most people come in here clinging to their decisions like they're hoping someone will talk them out of it. You didn't flinch." "I've already spent 20 years flinching," I said. Downstairs, the sun had shifted. Afternoon light stretched long across the sidewalk. I stood there for a moment, holding my bag, feeling oddly light. I hadn't just changed names on a document. I'd rewritten the legacy of my own story. James would be fine. He always was. His wife had family money. They'd navigate the mortgages and expenses. Maybe he'd be angry. Maybe not. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I hailed a cab. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Anywhere in particular?" "Back to the hotel," I said. "I have a cinnamon roll waiting." He laughed. And for once I did too. I didn't want to write him anything. That was the truth. There was something satisfying about silence. Letting absence do the work. Letting unanswered questions hang in the air like smoke that never clears. But silence, I've learned, can also be cowardice. And I wasn't afraid of James. Not anymore. So that night, after the sun dipped behind the low line of shops across the street, I sat at the little desk in my hotel room, pulled out the hotel stationery, cream-colored with a faint blue border, and uncapped a black pen. Not a text, not an email. Ink on paper. I started with his name. James, not Jimmy, not sweetheart, not the name I whispered over crib rails when he was teething. Just James. The man. The son who had made a decision, and now would hear mine. I paused, then wrote. I arrived Thursday, as planned. I brought the veil, the gift, and the dress you'll never see. I sat at gate 14 with a suitcase full of history and hope, and I received your message just before baggage claim. 5 words. Actually, it's just her family. I waited. I thought perhaps it was a mistake, that you would follow it with another. I'm sorry. We'll figure it out. Please still come. But nothing came. So I made my own plan. I stayed in a hotel. I walked the city. I watched strangers be kind to each other. I ate a cinnamon roll alone on a bench and felt more dignity than I have in years. I thought about what it means to be a mother. I thought about what I gave you, my time, my body, my money, my stories. I remembered staying up all night with you during fevers, making birthday cakes shaped like dinosaurs, driving to spelling bees and soccer games and piano lessons. You were never unloved. You were never unsupported. And yet, somewhere along the way, you decided that I no longer fit the image you wanted, that I was too plain, too small town, too much like where you came from, and not enough like where you were going. I don't begrudge you your success. I wanted you to have everything. But I never expected that in giving you that freedom, I would lose my place in your life entirely. I wasn't angry when you sent the message. I was empty. And then surprisingly, I felt relieved. Because finally, I had permission to stop waiting, to stop sending checks and quiet love and photos that went unreturned, to stop wondering what I had done wrong. It wasn't what I did. It's what you chose. You chose not to invite your mother to your wedding. Not out of cruelty, perhaps, but out of discomfort. You didn't want to explain me. You didn't want to fold me into your curated life. So I will not be folded. Instead, I've opened something new. I've canceled all future transfers and removed your access to my accounts. I've rewritten my will. Clara is now the sole beneficiary of my estate. Not because I want to punish you, but because she has never pretended I don't exist. She met me at a cafe and asked what happened. She listened. She stayed. She cared. You used to be that boy. Maybe one day you'll want to find him again. If you do, I won't slam the door. But I won't stand in the doorway either, holding a tray of forgiveness for someone who hasn't asked. Your absence at your own wedding may not have looked like a chair left empty, but it was. Mine. And now that I've filled it, with my own self, my own voice, I'm not giving it back. I wish you peace, and I wish you honesty. The kind that starts when you look in the mirror and ask, what did I choose? Love, because I never stopped. Mom, I read it twice before folding it. No rage, no theatrics, just truth, weighty and clear. I slipped it into an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and left it on the corner of the desk. Not for mailing, not yet. But it existed now, like a stone placed gently on a grave, not to mark a death, but to say, I came, I remembered, and now I can walk on. The morning of the wedding dawned like any other, sunlit, clean, with a breeze that tugged gently at the palms outside my window. No fanfare, no ache, just morning. I had no invitation, no seat among the rows of white chairs, but I knew the time, knew the place. Clara had mentioned it once without realizing what she was giving away. So I dressed. Not in the navy dress I'd brought for the ceremony, but in a soft gray blouse and slacks. Comfortable, clean, appropriate for sitting in a garden, watching life go on without needing to be part of it. I took a taxi. The venue was a private estate on a hill, the kind of place that photographs well. Stone pathways, arched hedges, pale roses blooming too perfectly to be real. The gates were open, guests filtering in, all pastels and linen and laughter. I didn't go inside. There was a bench across the street, shaded by an old jacaranda tree. I sat there, veil in my bag, hands folded, quiet, not hiding, just witnessing. A man parked a golf cart near the entrance. Two women in matching silk dresses adjusted each other's hair. A young couple posed for a selfie beside the ivy-covered arch. I could hear the distant murmur of music warming up, strings soft and pleasant. I watched them arrive, each one oblivious to the woman across the street who'd paid for more than one of their champagne flutes. I saw James, too. He stepped out of a black car, tall and polished, laughing at something the best man said. His tuxedo fit him perfectly. His hair was combed the way I used to do when he was 5, parted to the side, smoothed with a little water. He didn't look toward the street, didn't glance back, as if the world behind him had never existed. I wasn't angry. I thought I might be. That seeing him in his final act of exclusion might break something in me. But all I felt was distance, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. A woman in a pearl pink gown approached him. The bride, I assumed. Her smile was radiant, practiced. She looped her arm through his and said something I couldn't hear. He nodded. They walked toward the archway, guests rising, and I stayed on my bench, invisible and whole. Somewhere inside, vows were being exchanged, promises made, toasts prepared. I hoped it would be a kind marriage. I hoped they'd find something lasting. But I wasn't part of that story. Not anymore. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes. I know because I counted. Birds came and went. A dog barked in the distance. Someone spilled what looked like white wine on their shoes. And then the applause came, loud and cheerful. People filtered back down the walk. Music picked up. Cameras clicked. James posed with his in-laws, with friends, with the officiant. Not with me. Never again with me. I stood up then, quietly, smoothing my shirt, brushing a few petals from my lap. I didn't feel bitter. I felt untethered. There's something powerful about seeing a moment you were excluded from and realizing you survived it. I turned away from the estate, walked back toward the city, past shops, past the cafe where Clara and I had met, past strangers who smiled at me like I belonged. And I did. Because sometimes, family isn't who invites you to a wedding. It's who meets you the next day for breakfast, just to hear how you slept. Clara met me the next morning. She didn't wear makeup. Her hair was in a loose bun, and she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But when she saw me, she smiled. Not politely, not out of guilt, but with something quieter. Relief, maybe, or recognition. We sat outside a small cafe near the park, the same one where we'd met before, though we didn't mention it. She ordered tea. I asked for coffee, strong. For a while, we just sat. The hum of morning life moved around us, dishes clinking, bikes rolling past, someone's dog yipping at pigeons. How was it? I asked gently. She blinked. Strange. How so? It all looked beautiful. Perfect, really. But it felt thin. I nodded, letting her find her words. No one mentioned you, she said. Not once. I kept waiting for it. For someone to say, too bad Mary couldn't be here, or even just ask where you were. But they didn't. That doesn't surprise me. She bit her lip. I wanted to say something. I almost did, during the toasts. But I didn't want to make it about me, or you, or anything. You did the right thing, I said. No, I don't think I did. I just did the easy thing. I looked at her carefully. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but steady. That Whitney steadiness. It skipped her father but came through in her. You're not responsible for my pain, Clara. I know, she said. But I still felt it. She pulled something from her bag. A folded napkin. Inside was the locket. She laid it on the table between us but didn't push it toward me. I brought it with me yesterday. I kept it in my dress pocket the whole time. That's not a pocket piece. I know, she smiled. But it felt right. Like I was carrying you with me. I touched the locket gently, then slid it back toward her. It's yours, I said. Not just to keep. To wear. To carry forward. She looked down at her tea. I think Dad knows I'm upset. He tried to joke with me last night, but I barely answered. You don't have to choose. But I already have, she said quietly. Not sides, just truth. I know who's honest with me. I know who sees me. I felt something shift in me then. Not triumph, not victory, just healing. Like a door long swollen shut, finally creaking open. I wish I could promise it won't get harder, I said. But it might. The older you get, the more people will ask you to pretend things are fine that aren't. She nodded slowly. You're the only one who's ever said that out loud. I reached across the table and held her hand. You don't owe anyone silence. She squeezed back. Neither do you. We sat like that until the sun got too warm on our shoulders. Until the tea cooled. Until the waitress came by and smiled, saying, You two look alike. And for the first time in years, I believed it was a compliment. Because I wasn't just someone's forgotten mother. I was Clara's grandmother, and that was more than enough. I flew home on a Tuesday. Same airline, same suitcase. But everything felt different. The air in the terminal didn't press against my chest like it had days before. My steps were slower, but steadier. I wasn't leaving anything behind. Not really. I was taking something with me, something I hadn't known I'd needed. The end of pretending. The flight was quiet, a few businessmen scrolling through slides, a couple with a toddler between them, dozing against each other's shoulders. I read a book I didn't finish, stared out the window, ordered tomato juice just to taste something real. The Minneapolis sky was soft and low when we landed, not dramatic, not cold, just honest, the kind of gray that asks nothing of you. A cab took me home. The driver didn't speak much, and I didn't fill the silence. The streets looked exactly as I'd left them. That was a comfort, not a disappointment. When I stepped through my door, the familiar creak greeted me like an old friend. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender cleaner. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I set my suitcase down gently and walked through each room like I was seeing it new. The kitchen, with its chipped tile. The living room, where George's chair still sat beneath the reading lamp. The bedroom, where the photo of him and James as a toddler still rested on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. Didn't turn it down. I just let it be what it was. A moment caught in time, not erased by what came after. I made myself tea. Not hotel tea. My tea. Chamomile and mint, with a spoonful of honey and the mug that said, World's Okayest Mom. A joke gift from Clara when she was 12. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the late afternoon light settle on the porch. The daffodils had opened fully now, yellow and defiant. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would. That coming home would unlock the tears I hadn't allowed, but instead, I felt calm, clean. The way a room feels after you've finally pulled the old rug and seen the floor beneath it. Later, I went to the drawer. The one that sticks on the left. I opened it, pulled out the folder marked James. I sat at the table, turning each page over one last time. Receipts, transfers, notes. Each one a quiet record of a love that had expected nothing in return and received exactly that. I took the shredder from the hallway closet. I fed the pages in slowly, one by one, not with spite, with peace. This wasn't punishment. It was pruning. What doesn't grow gets cut back. When I finished, I emptied the bin into a paper bag and set it by the back door to go out with the trash. It felt light, considering how much of my life had just passed through those blades. Then I opened the small linen closet and reached for the box. The veil. I laid it out on the bed, careful as always. Ran my fingers over the lace. I didn't cry then, either. Instead, I smiled. The veil had been worn by strong women. Ruth, who raised 4 children through wartime. Me, who buried a husband and kept going. It didn't need another wedding to have value. It didn't need another girl to wear it to matter. It had already done its work. I folded it back into its cloth, tied it with the same ribbon, and placed it in the cedar chest. Maybe Clara would want it one day. Maybe not. I wouldn't ask. That choice would be hers, the way this week had finally been mine. Before bed, I opened my phone. A single message from James. "Hope you're doing okay? Ceremony went well." I stared at it a long while. Then I deleted it, not unanswered, not angry. Just unnecessary. I climbed into bed. Same side. Same blanket folded at the foot. I turned off the light, let the quiet fill the room, and breathed. No one was going to rewrite the past, but I had rewritten my place in the present. And in the morning, the daffodils would still be standing. So would I. It's been 3 months since the wedding. The seasons turned slowly here, as they always do. The trees shifted from pale green to that fuller, heavier shade they wear just before the heat sets in. My garden's blooming again. Lilacs this time, and some stubborn tulips I thought wouldn't return. I spend more time outside now, not to escape the house, not to busy my hands, just because the world feels gentler when I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I water the plants, watch the neighborhood kids ride their bikes too fast, bake small things no one asks for, and I rest. I rest in a way I hadn't realized I'd forgotten. Sometimes Clara calls. Sometimes she comes by. We don't talk about the wedding, not anymore. We talk about her courses, the book she's reading, a boy she's not sure about. She brings coffee sometimes, leaves wearing one of my old cardigans. Always says thank you. Always hugs me longer than needed. That's our rhythm now, not a replacement. A beginning. James hasn't called, not since that message I never answered, and I don't expect him to. I don't need closure anymore. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes the answer isn't reconciliation, it's release. Letting go without bitterness. Stepping out of someone's shadow and realizing the sun still finds you. I've been cleaning out drawers. Not because I'm preparing to leave, but because I finally want to live in a house that holds only what serves me. I gave away 4 coats, 2 vases, 3 boxes of Christmas lights I don't have the ladder to hang anymore. It feels good to unburden without mourning. I found an old photograph yesterday. Me and James at the lake. He was maybe 9. I had a bandana around my hair and sunglasses too big for my face. He's holding a fish, grinning wide, his hand in mine. I didn't cry. I just looked. He was a good boy once, and I was a good mother. That much, no wedding can erase. I put the photo in a drawer, not to forget, but to stop waiting for it to come back to life. Some memories are best left quiet, like dried flowers pressed in a book. You don't need to hold them every day. It's enough to know they're there. And if you've read this far, I'll tell you the truth. I'm not sad. Not in the way people expect. I grieved my son long before that text. What I feel now is lighter. Like I've stepped out of a room that was dim for years, into the honest morning light. It doesn't mean I don't love him. It means I love myself more now than I used to. That's the gift I gave myself this year. Not revenge, not retribution. Dignity, ownership, silence. Chosen rather than endured. And if you, sitting wherever you are, reading this, have ever felt pushed aside, erased, or uninvited by the very people you built your life around, Let me tell you something simple. You are still the author of your story. They don't get to write your ending just because they stopped reading halfway through. Stand up. Sit tall. Shred the old accounts. Wear the dress anyway. Eat the cinnamon roll. Speak the truth, even if it shakes. And if they didn't save you a seat, pull up your own chair or walk away entirely. But don't you dare believe you're disposable. You are not. You are the root they grew from. And you, my dear, are allowed to grow again on your own terms, in your own light. If this story moved you, share it. Tell someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Say, I see you. Because I promise, someone is waiting for those words. And if you've ever sat alone at the airport with a suitcase full of love and nowhere to place it, know this: you're not the only one. And you are never, ever too late to begin again.